It stings when that thought hits you. I've wasted my life. But you know what? It's even worse when a part of you believes it might be true. You haven't taken a traditional path and you haven't followed the standard steps most people take. In fact, most of the time, maybe you didn't even want to conform, and now a part of you wishes you had. But your past wasn't wasted. In fact, your past has value. My name is Paddy Kelly. I'm a financial consultant and economics professor, and I've spent half my life analyzing and determining what has value. So in this video, I'm going to show you why your life wasn't a waste. In fact, it's unique, why that uniqueness has value, and how you can leverage that value to your advantage. To get started, let me tell you a quick story. On my 30th birthday, I moved to the north of Spain for a 7-month stay. I was in a committed relationship and I was working as a financial consultant. I could have stayed in London where salaries were bigger and opportunities were definitely greater, but I wanted to travel. I wanted to speak another language, I wanted adventure. I wanted to live a more meaningful life. Fast forward 5 years, my consultancy was struggling, my relationship was over, I was no longer living in north of Spain, and looking back and everything that was gone or had changed, I thought, yeah, I've wasted my life. Everyone, all my friends from college, they all seemed to be flying, and I just wasn't, and I just really didn't know what to do about it. And look, the truth is that this wasn't the first time I thought that, and it hasn't been the last. Basically, at every pivotal moment of my life, I've had the thought, I've wasted my life. But the ironic thing here is that after each of these points, life did change. It got better. And though it took a while to sink in, I started to realize something. Life is long. And when you take a nonlinear path, like I have, and maybe like you have, choosing curiosity over certainty or meaning over money, then you just can't measure yourself along everyone else's timeline. It just doesn't work. You need to zoom out. You need a wider lens, because when you take the scenic route through life, it takes longer. It's slower. Sometimes it feels like you're lost. Sometimes it looks like you're going in the wrong direction entirely, but you're still moving. You're still becoming. You're still getting somewhere, even if it doesn't look like it from close up. This is the case with almost everything in life. Take luck, for example, right? Imagine two guys rushing for the same plane. One guy gets it, the other guy doesn't. The guy who got it seems like the luckier one, right? But now let's say the plane crashes. Well, the next day things look different. Now it's the other guy who didn't catch the plane. He's the luckier one. The point is, what looks like bad luck, unfairness, failure in the moment just might be the best thing that ever happened to you if you give it time. This truth applies to career, relationships, finance. A closed door might be a reroute, not a rejection. What you're working on right now might not pay off in schedule, but it will later. And what feels like being behind might be laying the foundations for something no one, including you, can see yet. How you frame time changes everything. Zoom in and you'll only see failure. Zoom out and you realize you were never off track. You were just on your own timeline. Look, I know from experience that when you feel like you've wasted years of your life, it's very hard to believe someone who says, hey, no, look, don't worry, it's to your advantage. It just doesn't land, right? It seems like they don't get it. But the truth is, I do get it, and let me prove it to you. In my finance and economic lectures, I teach this concept called cumulative advantage. Basically, it just means that the earlier you start something, the longer you stick with it, then the more advantage you have over time. Think of investing. So let's say you start investing at 21 years old and you do this consistently over time. The compound interest over decades just gives you a massive head start over someone who starts later. Even if they put in more, they just can't catch up. Time works in your favor. But here's the thing, this principle doesn't just apply to money. It applies to skills, relationships, even confidence. It applies to anything you can think of. And look, people who follow a traditional path, a person who picks something early, sticks with it, builds in a straight line, well, their cumulative advantage is obvious, right? It appears in their salary, their job position, maybe even their social status. But for people who take a non-linear path, people who explore, who fail, who pivot, who start over more than once, well, their cumulative advantage is in uniqueness, in combinations of perspective, emotional intelligence, resilience, adaptability, the ability to navigate uncertainty. Things that don't necessarily show up on a CV, but matter so much when life gets real. The whole time you've been compounding too, just not in a way that shows up on some spreadsheet. Think about it. You're compounding every single time you choose something that matters to you, rather than something that everyone else says you should care about. Those moments when you walked away from something that just didn't feel right, or when you tried something new and thought, yeah, that's just not for me. That wasn't wasted time. That was you learning your values, and every one of those choices compounds into a more authentic version of yourself. And whether it be work, finances, relationships, or even health, what matters most is your unique cumulative advantage. For example, in business, this is very obvious. Everyone knows that in any crowded marketplace, differentiation is a competitive advantage. Just think about coffee shops, right? There's a Starbucks in every corner, but the ones people go out of their way for, It's the ones with something different, a unique vibe, a local story, a menu no one else has. And the same is true in the labor market, whether it be executives, creators, consultants, artists, whatever it is. The market's saturated, and what sets you apart is your uniqueness. There's a Harvard Business Review article I read recently, and it said that distinctiveness in career identity increases upward mobility. And the reason why is because companies now are hiring more for culture add than culture fit. Ultimately, the more unique your mix of experiences, the more competitive advantage you have, because the more value you add and the harder it is to replace you. The truth is, and this is very important, that this applies to every part of your life that you care to look at. The thing that's wrong here is not what you spent your time doing, rather it's how you think about what you spent your time doing. You've done valuable things, you just might not know how to unlock the value in them. So let me help you with that. A simple but very effective framework you can use to leverage your uniqueness is the APP framework. A is for audit, which basically just means you surface your hidden value. P is for position. This is where you take control and narrative over your hidden value. And then finally, the other P is play. This is where you play the right game, where you leverage that value to get ahead. So the first step is audit. This is where you look at your hidden value, right? So you look at your skills, your perceptions, your insights, right? All the things that maybe don't show up in a traditional CV, but are very important, very valuable, and very useful. The whole time this wasn't visible, but now you want to surface this value and make it visible. Start by asking yourself, what have I developed through repetition? What have I learned through pain, failure, or adaptation? What problems do I solve without even thinking about it? What do people come to me for that I've never thought to take seriously? This is your hidden value. For example, if you've pivoted careers, you've probably built incredible adaptability. If you've dealt with tough personal challenges, you may have developed empathy, resilience, or even conflict resolution. If you've explored many fields or interests, you're likely strong in pattern recognition, creative synthesis, or even connecting dots others don't even see. So treat this like an inventory exercise, right? So first, list your lived experiences. Second, you want to reflect on the value of those experiences, what they taught you. And then finally, you want to find evidence, right? Things that people told you, things you've solved that other people couldn't solve, skills you've developed the hard way. Whatever has value, look for evidence. Write it all down, name it and claim it. You can't use what you don't consciously value. Now, once you've audited your hidden value, the next thing to do is to position it, to frame your uniqueness as an asset, not as a liability. So if your path is nonlinear, if you've changed industries, if you've tried different things, if you've failed in public, even if you've taken breaks in life, it all seems messy, but it's this messiness that is your uniqueness. It's your leverage if you frame it correctly. So what does this actually mean? It means you need to connect the dots in a way that shows how your lived experience adds value in your work, in your relationships, in how you think. If you're a generalist, position that as range. Show how it allows you to connect ideas across domains, solve complex problems, or work across functionality in teams where others struggle to translate between silos. If you've switched paths, frame it as agility and adaptability. You're someone who knows how to learn, how to grow, and how to reinvent. That's a superpower in a world that's changing faster than ever. If you failed publicly, position that as resilience. Talk about what it taught you, how it made you more emotionally intelligent, more empathetic, and more capable of navigating risk. You need to own the narrative. If you don't own your story, people interpret it through their expectations. But if you can frame it intentionally, with confidence and clarity, they start to see it your way. Of course, this doesn't mean that you should pretend that your past was perfect. Of course not, right? But what it does mean is that you just reframe your past so that it has value. You find the value. It's there. What you did, experience. What you learned, value. And what you bring now, your unique edge. The more you articulate how your uniqueness, helps people, solves problems, or opens doors, the more powerful that experience becomes. You're now not just different, you're differently valuable. And in the world of sameness, this is incredibly powerful. The final step here is to play a different game, and that's where most people get stuck. They spend their energy trying to catch up with someone else's timeline, run someone else's race, follow someone else's rules. But if you didn't get an early head start in that game, don't try to win it. Forget that. Change games. Find your lane. Find your game. That's the real power of having a unique story, is that it gives you angles nobody else has. So what does that mean? How does that work? Find your lane, or better, find your intersection of lanes. Maybe you've worked in both tech and education. Leverage that to pursue roles in edtech. Maybe you've traveled a lot but live local. Leverage that to set up groups for like-minded people. Maybe you don't know how to invest but know a lot about history. Leverage that to make long-term economic predictions. Remember, as cheesy as it might sound, you are uniquely placed to be you. Leverage that. So look, if you've had that thought, I've wasted my life, then, first remember, you're not alone. Lots of people do. I've had it myself, and I've had it more times than I can count. And it sucks. Especially, it really just does get into your head. But the older I get, the more I realize that that really does just come from looking to your life too close up. You need to zoom out. Like starting with one puzzle piece, and thinking, oh, that doesn't make sense, without really taking the bigger picture into account. You haven't been standing still. You've been collecting experiences, values, skills. And though it seems a bit messy, it's not. It's all real. And now, maybe for the first time, you're in a position to use them. That doesn't mean pretending that everything you did in your past was perfect. No, it just means that you stop treating it like it was a mistake, because it wasn't. It was the build-up. You're not starting over. You're starting from here with everything you've learned along the way. And that's not nothing. That's your uniqueness. That's your cumulative advantage. That's your edge. Yeah, so maybe now's the time to stop trying to catch up with someone else's timeline, someone else's story, and just start writing your own.